Compounding may be the most powerful force shaping ordinary life, and most people completely misunderstand it. They think compounding only belongs to rich investors. It does not. Compounding is why two people with the same salary, the same job, and the same background can live completely different. Lives 10 years later, it quietly multiplies money, skill, trust, health, and regret if you do not understand that you can spend years doing the right things and still quit right before your life is about to change. That is why so many ordinary people feel confused by their own lives you wake up at. The same time every morning you make your coffee, you navigate the exact same commute, and you put in a solid 8 or 9 hours of work. You are not lazy, you pay your bills on time, you try your best to set a little bit of money aside when you can, and you generally try to make responsible choices yet. When you sit down at the end of the year and look at your bank account, your career progress, or your overall stress levels, nothing seems to have changed. You feel like you are walking on a treadmill. You are burning an incredible amount of energy, making all the right motions, but your actual position in life remains completely static. This is the quiet, exhausting frustration that defines the modern working class. You look at people who seem to effortlessly move upward in wealth or career, and you assume they must have access to some secret strategy that was never explained to you. While luck and background certainly exist, the deeper reason you feel stuck is much more fundamental. It has nothing to do with a lack of effort on your part. The reason your life feels completely flat is that you have been conditioned from birth to expect linear progress from choices that only make sense when viewed through compounding. From the time you are a child in school, you are taught a very simple linear equation for success. You do 1 hour of homework and you get one good grade. When you enter the workforce, that linear equation becomes even more ingrained in your mind. You trade 1 hour of your physical labor or your mental attention and you receive $20 in return. You work 40 hours, you get paid for 40 hours it is. A straight, predictable line, 1 unit of effort always equals 1 unit of immediate reward. Because this linear transaction is how you survive your daily life, you naturally assume that building wealth, achieving financial freedom, or completely changing your life trajectory works the exact same way. You assume that if you just work twice as hard, you will become twice as wealthy. You believe that progress should be visible, measurable, and immediate every single day, but true wealth, whether it is financial wealth, career leverage, or deep personal stability, does not operate on a linear timeline. The most powerful force in economics and arguably in human behavior is compounding. Some of the greatest fortunes in history were built not through a magical ability to predict the future, but through the simple, unstoppable math of compounding over a very long period of time. Most ordinary people hear the word compounding and immediately tune out. They assume it is a dry mathematical concept that only applies to Wall Street bankers' index funds or billionaires sitting on massive stock portfolios. They think that because they only have a few $100s in their savings account, the concept of compounding does not apply to their ordinary lives. This is a tragic misunderstanding. Compounding is not just a financial formula. It is a quiet force that shapes far more than an investment account. It influences your money, but it also influences your daily habits. Your physical health, your professional skills, and your reputation in the marketplace. Every decision you make is either compounding for you or it is compound I. None against you. The tragedy of the ordinary worker is that they are entirely blind to this force. Because they expect linear, immediate rewards, they get incredibly frustrated when they do not see instant results. From their good decisions, they start a new habit, save a little money, or learn a new skill. But when their life does not magically transform in 3 months, they quit, they reset their progress back to zero, completely unaware that they stopped just moments before the compounding curve was about to tilt upward. Today we are going to look at how compounding actually works. In the reality of an ordinary life, we are going to strip away the complex investing jargon and look at how this invisible force shapes your bank account, your earning power, your relationships, and your daily stress. We will explore why surviving the incredibly boring and visible early stages of a good habit is the single greatest filter for success. By the end of this, you will understand that you do not need to make massive heroic leaps to escape the financial maze. You only need to align your ordinary daily actions with the quiet, unstoppable math of compounding, and finally let time do the heavy lifting to understand why compounding is so universally the invisible phase. Most people cannot survive misunderstood by the working class. You have to look at the geometry of a compounding curve. If you map it out on a piece of paper, it does not look like a staircase going steadily upward. For a very long time, the line is almost completely flat. It hovers just above zero, moving horizontally for months, years, or even decades before it finally begins to bend violently upward. This long, flat, horizontal stretch is what destroys ordinary people. I call it the valley of disappointment. It is the invisible phase of compounding where your effort is high, your discipline is consistent, but your visible, tangible results are absolutely zero. Because the modern world has destroyed our attention spans and addicted us to immediate gratification, surviving this flat line has become the hardest thing a human being can do. Imagine a highly realistic scenario. You decide that you're finally going to get your financial life in order. You cut up your credit cards, you stop eating out at restaurants, and you commit to saving $200 every single month from your paycheck for an ordinary worker finding an extra $200 a month. Requires real painful sacrifice. You are saying no to your friends. You are wearing older clothes, and you are feeling the pinch of deprivation every single day you do this faithfully for an entire year, 12 months of grinding discipline. At the end of the year, you look at your savings account, and you have $2,400 maybe. If you put it in a high yield account, you earned an extra $100 in interest. You look at that number, and a crushing sense of defeat washes over you. You spend an entire year restricting your life, and the reward is a sum of money that barely covers a single major emergency. Then reality strikes, your car's transmission fails, or you get an unexpected medical bill for $2,000. You write the check, and suddenly your account is right back to zero. In that exact moment, the valley of disappointment whispers a very convincing lie into your ear. It tells you that saving money is a scam. It tells you that the system is rigged, that your sacrifices were completely meaningless, and that you might as well just spend your next paycheck on something fun because you are never going to get ahead anyway. You conclude that the habit failed you. So you quit, you go back to living paycheck to paycheck, completely unaware of the mathematical reality of what just happened. The math of compounding dictates that the early stages are always invisible when a snowball starts rolling down a hill. It is the size of a golf ball when it completes its first revolution and only picks up a few tiny flakes of snow. It looks exactly the same. It can roll over and over again. And to the naked eye, nothing is happening, but it is storing potential energy. It is building the surface area required to eventually pick up massive sheets of snow with a single turn. When your $2,000 was wiped out by a car repair, your financial compounding was temporarily interrupted, but the compounding of your behavior was not the discipline it took to save that money. It was actively reshaping your identity, but because ordinary people only measure success by the final, immediate, visible number, they abandon the behavior entirely. When they face a setback, this exact same dynamic plays out in every other area of human self-improvement. Think about physical health. You decide to get in shape. You wake up at 5 in the morning. You go for a run in the cold, and you eat a salad instead of a burger. You do this for 20 straight days. On day 21, you look in the mirror, and you look exactly the same. You step on the scale, and the needle has not moved a single inch. The lack of visible progress feels like a personal insult. Your brain concludes that the running is not working, so you turn off your alarm clock and go back to sleep. You quit because you expected linear results. You expected 20 days of effort to equal 20 days of visible physical transformation. But biological compounding does not work that way inside your body and visible. Changes were occurring. Your cardiovascular system was building new capillaries. Your metabolism was slowly shifting, and your bones were becoming denser. The foundation for massive exponential change was being laid silently in the dark. But because you could not see it on the surface, you destroyed the foundation before it could ever support a new structure, the wealthy, the successful, and the highly skilled. Understand that the flat line is not a P. Area of failure, they know that the valley of disappointment is simply the toll you have to pay to access the exponential curve. Later on, they do not need a daily pat on the back, and they do not need to see immediate fireworks to know that they are heading in the right direction if you want to. Change your ordinary life, you have to fundamentally change your relationship with boredom and delayed gratification. You must accept that the most profound transformations in your wealth, your health, and your career will spend years disguised as a lack of progress. You have to stop trusting your eyes in the short term and start trusting the mathematics of compounding in the long term. When we talk about the compounding of money, most people immediately picture a legendary investor letting a fortune grow for decades. The compounding of money and margin until the numbers become almost absurd because the scale feels so distant. ordinary working people struggle to see how this math applies to their own lives. They look at their small paycheck and think, if I only have $1,000 to invest, compounding it at 8% a year will only make me $80. That does not change my life. Why should I even care? This is a fundamental misunderstanding of what financial compounding actually does for the working class, for the ordinary person making $50,000 a year. The early stages of compounding are not about becoming a billionaire. They're about buying something far more valuable in the short. Term margin is the breathing room between your current circumstances and absolute disaster. It is the distance between you and panic when you live paycheck to paycheck. You have zero margin, your financial life is highly brittle, a single flat tire, a leaky roof, or a missed week of work due. To illness can throw your entire existence into chaos. When you have zero margin, you are forced to make desperate decisions. You take out paid. I-loans with predatory interest rates, you put groceries on credit cards you cannot pay off, and you stay in toxic, abusive jobs because you literally cannot afford to miss a single Friday deposit. Building your first layer of financial compounding, say saving your first $5,000, is incredibly brutal. It feels like you are shoveling dirt with a spoon. You are sacrificing daily comforts for a number on a screen that seems insignificant. But what that $5,000 buys you is not a lifestyle upgrade. It buys you a shock absorber. Let us look at how margin creates a compounding effect on your life decisions. Imagine your car breaks down and the mechanic says it will cost $12 to fix. If you have zero margin, you panic. You put that $12 on a credit card charging 25% interest because you can only afford the minimum monthly payments that repair eventually cost you $2,000. Over the next few years, that is negative compounding dragging you backward. But if you have that $5,000 of compounded savings, the car breaking down is no longer a personal tragedy. It is simply an annoying Tuesday. You write a check for $12, your car is fixed, and your life continues. Without a single drop of debt or panic, by simply having the cash you prevented negative compounding from infecting your financial life. This is the invisible dividend of saving money as you continue to let your money compound you start to reach the next level of margin negotiating power. Win. You have 3 to 6 months of living expenses sitting quietly in a bank account. Your entire psychological posture at work changes. You stop operating from a place of fear if your manager asks you to do something unethical or expects you to work 60 hours a week for no extra pay. You suddenly have the power to say no. You can calmly walk into an interview and negotiate a higher salary because you do not reek of desperation. The employer knows they can not bully you into accepting a lowball offer because you do not absolutely need the job tomorrow to survive. This is how small amounts of compounded money lead to massive leaps in earning power. The money itself might only be earning a small percentage of interest, but the psychological confidence that money provides allows you to negotiate a 20% increase in your salary. The margin bought you the leverage to compound your primary income, eventually, if you simply refuse to interrupt the process. The math crosses a magical threshold. You reach a point where your money starts making its own money, independent of your physical labor. You wake up on a Saturday morning, you drink your coffee, you play with your children, and you realize that your investment portfolio generated more wealth that day than you could have made working an 8-hour shift your dollars have become. Your employees, they do not need sleep, they do not take vacations, and they do not complain. They work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, executing a relentless mathematical expansion. But to reach that point of ultimate freedom, you must first survive the brutal phase of building margin. You must be willing to endure the slow, boring accumulation of the first few $1,000s, completely ignoring the temptation to spend it on a fleeting luxury. You are not just saving pennies, you are systematically buying back your own freedom, 1 month of margin at a time, if we limit our understanding of compounding, the compounding of skill and earning power solely to money and interest rates. We miss the most powerful asset an ordinary person actually has control over: their own earning power. You cannot penny pinch your way to massive wealth if your income is permanently capped near the poverty line. At some point, you have to increase the amount of capital flowing into your system. This requires the quiet, deliberate compounding of professional skill and value. Most people treat their careers with the exact same linear mindset they apply to an hourly wage. They view their job as a simple daily exchange of time for money. They show up, do the bare minimum required to not get fired, collect their paycheck on Friday, and go home. They stay in the exact same position for a decade, and then complain bitterly that they are not moving up the corporate ladder, but they do not actually have 10 years of compounded experience. They have 1 year of basic experience repeated 10 times. True career growth is not linear. It does not happen just Because you have been sitting in an office chair for a long time, it happens through a process called skill stacking, compounding in the workplace, does not mean becoming the absolute best in the world at one tiny, highly specific thing for most ordinary people trying to be the top 1% in a single. Competitive field is statistically impossible. Instead, compounding your earning power means becoming very good at 3 or 4 complementary skills and letting them multiply each other's value over time. Let us look at a realistic example. Imagine you are an ordinary administrative assistant. Your primary skill is organizing schedules, answering emails, and keeping the office running. In your first year, you are paid purely for your basic organizational labor. You're easily replaceable, but instead of clocking out mentally at 5 o'clock, you decide to spend a few hours a week learning basic data analysis using spreadsheets. When you are in the flat phase of building a new skill, it is incredibly demoralizing. You might spend 6 months struggling with formulas and your paycheck does not change by a single penny. Your boss might not even notice this is the exact moment most people quit. They say, "Why am I doing this extra work for free?" But they do not realize that compounding requires a long runway. You are not working for free. You are quietly stockpiling leverage. It takes you an entire year to get comfortable with the data. Now you have 2 skills, organization and data analysis. The combination of those 2 makes you vastly more valuable than a standard assistant. You can not only schedule the quarterly meetings, but you can interpret the sales reports for those meetings. A year later, you decide to take a course on public speaking and professional communication. It is terrifying, and you feel incredibly awkward. But you push through the valley of disappointment. Now look at what you have: stacked organization. Data analysis and the ability to confidently present that data in front of executives. Individually, none of these skills require a genius-level IQ, but compounded together over a few years, they transform you from a replaceable hourly worker into an irreplaceable operations manager. Your salary does not just increase by a standard 3% for inflation, it jumps by 50% because you have crossed an invisible threshold of value. The skills compounded upon each other to create a unique, highly paid profile. This is exactly where the tragedy of impatience strikes the working class again. Many people destroy their own professional compounding by constantly resetting their trajectory. Because they feel bored or frustrated in the flat phase of learning a job, they job hop purely for a microscopic increase in pay. They leave a solid company where they were slowly building relationships. Understanding the internal politics and mastering a complex system just to make $1 more an hour at a completely different job across town. When you constantly switch industries, completely change your career path every 2 years, or abandon a trade halfway through your apprenticeship because it gets difficult, you are effectively liquidating your compounded experience. You are forcing yourself to start over as a beginner, completely stripping awe. The leverage of deep knowledge. You never stay in one place long enough to transition from the person who is told what to do to the person who is paid for their judgment. The highest paid people in society are not paid for the physical hours they work. They're paid for their judgment. A master mechanic can listen to a failing engine for 10 seconds, know exactly which internal part is broken, and fix it in 5 minutes. The customer is not paying for 5 minutes of physical labor. They are paying for the 10 years of compounded invisible failure, repetition, and hyper-focused. Learning that allowed the mechanic to diagnose the problem instantly if you want to escape the trap of selling your physical time for a flat hourly wage. You must approach your career as an investment portfolio. You have to ask yourself, are the daily tasks I am doing adding a new durable layer of skill to my foundation? Am I staying in this field long enough to actually let my expertise multiply? You have to resist the overwhelming urge to constantly jump ship at the first sign of boredom or a tiny pay bump. Find an industry that has room to grow. Start building your stack of skills and have the patience to let your accumulated competence become so undeniable that the market is forced to pay you for your judgment rather than your time. The compounding of reputation and trust. When we think about building a stable life, our minds naturally focus on the things we can count or measure. We look at the dollars in our bank account, the title on our resume, or the specific technical skills we've acquired, but there's another form of capital that is completely invisible and yet arguably the single most powerful compound asset a human being can possess. This asset is your reputation and the trust you build with the people around you. There is an old rule in business that it can take 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to destroy it. But what does that actually mean for an ordinary worker? It is not just public relations advice for billionaires or corporations. It is a fundamental law of social gravity that dictates how easily you will move through your life and your career. Trust is the ultimate social currency, and just like money, it compounds incredibly slowly in the beginning and then exponentially over time. Think about the early stages of building a reputation for absolute reliability. In the beginning, it feels exactly like the valley of disappointment we discussed with saving money. You show up to work on time, you do exactly what you promised to do, you do not cut corners, you do not gossip, and you take responsibility when you make a mistake. For the first few years, what is your reward for this high level of integrity? Usually nothing but more work you do not get a parade for. Being honest on a Tuesday, your paycheck does not double just because you were reliable for 6 months, because the initial rewards of integrity are invisible. Many ordinary people simply stop trying. They see a coworker who lies, takes credit for other people's work, or cuts corners, and they watch. That person get a temporary promotion or a slight bump in pay. The ordinary person looks at that and concludes that playing by the rules is a scam. They decide that reliability does not pay the bills, so they lower their standards. They start arriving a little late, making small excuses and doing. The bare minimum, they interrupt the compounding of their own reputation because they want an immediate payoff, but let us look at what happens if you refuse to interrupt that process. Imagine you're an independent contractor, a plumber, or an electrician in your first year of business. You are barely surviving. You show up when you say, you charge a fair price, and you do excellent work, but you are still struggling to find clients. You are in the flat phase of the compounding curve. However, every time you treat a customer with absolute honesty, you are depositing a tiny amount of trust into a compounding account. Year 2 is a little better. Year 3, previous customers start calling you again by year 10. Something magical happens. You no longer need to spend a single dollar on advertising. You have a wait list of 6 months. You can charge a premium rate, and people will gladly pay it without arguing, because they are no longer just paying for your labor. They are paying for the peace of mind that comes from your compounded reputation. They know you will not cheat them. And that absolute certainty is a highly valuable compounding asset. This exact same dynamic plays out inside a corporate office. If you spend a decade being the person who consistently delivers without making excuses, your reputation begins. To precede you, you build a massive reservoir of trust with your managers and your peers. This compounded trust acts as a friction reducer in your life when a massive high-paying opportunity opens up in the company. The executives do not want to take a risk on an unknown variable. They want a sure thing. Your name becomes the only one in the room. Furthermore, when you inevitably make a massive mistake, because every human being makes mistakes, your compounded reputation acts as a shield. Instead of being fired, you are given the benefit of the doubt. Your boss assumes it was a rare anomaly rather than a character flaw. A strong reputation means opportunities automatically flow towards your deals close faster, and people actively want to help you succeed. It is the ultimate invisible multiplier of your ordinary efforts, but it requires the exact same agonizing patience as financial investing. You must be willing to do the right thing day after day, year after year, even when no one is watching, and even when there is no immediate financial reward, trusting that the math of human behavior will eventually pay you back. With exponential dividends so far, we have discussed compounding, the dark side of compounding, as a force that can rescue you from a life of financial stagnation. We have looked at how it multiplies your money, your earning power, and your social capital, but there's a terrifying reality about compounding that most people fail to respect. Compounding is completely amoral. It has no conscience. It does not care if it is building your life up or tearing your life down. To the foundation, it is a blind mathematical force, and it will multiply your bad habits just as ruthlessly and efficiently as it multiplies your good ones. We must confront the dark side of this equation. Negative compounding, the danger of negative compounding, is exactly the same as the danger of positive compounding. In the early stages, the consequences are almost entirely invisible. Because a small bad decision does not ruin your life immediately, you are tricked into believing that the decision has no cost. At all, you are lulled into a false sense of security, entirely unaware that a massive avalanche is slowly gathering momentum just out of sight. The most obvious brutal example of negative compounding is high-interest consumer debt. When you put a $2,000 vacation or a new television on a credit card charging 25% interest, and you only make the minimum monthly payments you have effectively hired, the most powerful force in the universe to work against you. You go to sleep and your debt grows, you take a sick day and your debt grows, you've created a machine that extracts wealth from your future physical labor and transfers it directly to a bank, regardless of how hard you work. You become a prisoner to your own past consumption, you will. Eventually spend $6,000 to pay off a $2,000 purchase. The math works identical. Allied to a long-term investment, except you are the one funding the exponential curve for someone else, but negative compounding extends far beyond your credit card statement. It is the silent killer of ordinary human potential, particularly when it comes to physical health. Imagine a 30-year-old worker who is stressed and exhausted to cope. They start eating heavily processed fast food, skipping the gym and sleeping only 5 hours a night if you eat a terrible meal, and skip a night of sleep, you do not drop dead. The next morning you wake up, you feel a little sluggish, but you go to work and function perfectly fine. The consequence of that single bad decision is functionally zero. So you repeat it the next day and the next week and the next year. You spend your entire 30s living in the flatline phase of negative compounding. You assume that because you have not had a heart attack, yet your body is somehow immune to your lifestyle. But biology, just like finance, never forgets. Every missed hour of sleep, every poor meal, and every day of zero movement is a tiny deposit into a negative compounding account. When that person hits 50 years old, the curve violently bends upward. Suddenly, they are facing chronic inflammation, severe cardiovascular issues, and a total collapse of their daily energy, their health. Did not fail overnight. They simply spent 20 years silently compounding their physical debt until the body finally issued a margin call, the exact same invisible. Math that builds an empire can completely destroy a human body. We see the same destructive math in human psychology and relationships. Think about a person who develops a tiny habit of complaining at first. It is just venting about a manager or gossiping about a coworker. It feels harmless. It provides a tiny burst of relief, but slowly over 5 or 10 years, that habit of complaining compounds into a deeply cynical, toxic personality every T. I may face a challenge. Their brain defaults to playing the victim. Eventually, their friends stop calling them their spouse. Slowly, emotionally detaches their employer, quietly removes them from leadership opportunities because their attitude drains the energy of the entire room. They end up isolated, bitter, and angry at the world, completely unaware that their isolation is the compound interest of 10,000 tiny negative conversations they chose to participate in. Over a decade, if you want to survive the modern world, you must develop a healthy, profound fear of negative compounding you. Have to realize that there are no neutral actions in your life. The universe does not pause. You are either making choices that will eventually lift you up, or you are making choices that are slowly, silently digging a hole that you will eventually be unable to climb out of the lack of and. Immediate painful punishment for a bad habit is not a lucky break. It is a trap. You must respect the math, and you must ruthlessly eliminate the small negative behaviors before they cross the invisible threshold and begin to exponentially destroy the life you're trying so hard to build. Understanding the mathematical reality of compounding the everyday compounding protocol is a profound shift in how you view the world, but intellectual understanding alone will not protect you from the psychological friction of ordinary life when you are tired, when your bills are piling up, and when everyone around you seems to be getting rich quickly. Your brain will scream at you to abandon your slow, boring strategies and chase immediate gratification. To survive the invisible early stages of the compounding curve, you cannot rely on sheer willpower. You must adopt a specific set of operating rules to protect your progress from your own impatience. I call this the everyday compounding protocol. It consists of 3 fundamental shifts in H. How you manage your behavior. The first rule is that you must completely change your unit of measurement. The modern economy is designed to keep you focused on the micro timeline. You're paid by the hour, your bills are due by the month. And your social media feeds update by the second because you are constantly forced to measure your life in days and weeks. You naturally expect your progress to be visible within that same tiny window if you check your retirement account every single afternoon, or if you step on a scale every single morning after starting a new health routine. You are intentionally torturing yourself. You are zooming in so closely on the compounding curve that all you see is a flat, unmoving line. This microscopic focus breeds overwhelming anxiety, which inevitably leads you to interrupt the process to harness compounding. You must start measuring your progress. In years and decades, you have to accept that a solid financial or professional decision made today might not yield a visible, tangible reward until 2029, when you stretch your timeline, the daily fluctuations completely lose their emotional power over you. The second rule of the protocol is Simple, do not interrupt something that is quietly working the best long-term records in finance. All point to the same lesson. Strong decisions usually do more for you when you stop touching them in the context of an ordinary working life. This is the most difficult rule to follow. We are addicted to tinkering. We love to tear things down and rebuild them just to feel a sense of control. Imagine you have been steadily paying an extra $100 a month toward a high-interest auto loan for a year. You are making quiet mathematical progress. Then you get a tax refund of $1,000. The urge to interrupt your compounding is going to be incredibly intense. You will want to pause the boring debt payoff plan and use that money to go on a vacation or buy a new television, telling yourself that you will get back on track next month. But when you interrupt the process, you do not just lose a month of progress. You lose the mathematical momentum of that money working for you. Over the next 5 years, the same applies to your career. If you are 2 years into learning a highly valuable trade and you suddenly decide to quit and start drop shipping products on the internet because you saw an advertisement, you have unnecessarily interrupted your professional compounding. You must learn to sit on your hands if a system is working. If a habit is positive and if a debt is shrinking, your primary job is to leave it alone. The third and final rule is to focus entirely on your trajectory, not your speed. When ordinary people decide to change their lives, they usually try to change everything all at once they decide to wake up at. 4 in the morning, read a book a week, invest half their income, and go to the gym every single day. This is an attempt to force exponential results through sheer speed. It almost always results in a total psychological collapse within 3 weeks. Compounding does not require heroic, massive bursts of speed. It only requires a slightly positive trajectory sustained over a massive amount of time. You do not need to read a book a week. You just need to read 5 pages a night. Before bed, you do not need to invest half your income. You just need to automatically transfer $50 a week into a broad market index fund and then forget the password to the account. There is also a practical environmental rule. Hidden inside all of this, make the good path easier than the bad path. If every positive choice depends on your mood, your compounding will constantly break. Put your savings on autopilot. Keep healthier food in the house than junk food. Remove shopping apps from your phone. Put your study materials where you can see them. The goal is not to become a robot. The goal is to stop asking your stressed, tired future self to make heroic decisions every night. Good systems protect compounding when motivation disappears. This is why ordinary life changes so dramatically once a few small systems are in place. A person with automatic savings, reduced debt, a weekly learning habit, and a calmer spending environment may not look impressive in any one month, but 5 years later, that person has built a completely different operating system. They have less chaos, fewer expensive mistakes, and far more room to think clearly. What looks boring from the outside is often exactly what is building freedom on the inside. If you spend slightly less than you earn, if you learn one small new thing about your industry every month, and if you treat people with slightly more respect than is strictly required, your trajectory is positive. Your angle is pointing upward. You might feel like you are moving at a crawl, but over a 10-year horizon, a 2-degree positive shift in your daily trajectory will land you in a completely different financial and personal universe. You do not need to be the fastest person on the track. You just need to refuse to stop walking. That's all. Thanks for watching.